Hey guys, welcome to Terrifying Tales. In this video we are going to represent you a story about The Spotted Tail, Chapter 2 Inches. The man rose, giving a respectful nod of his head. Good morning, Mr. Cushing, Mrs. Cushing. Sorry to see you. I will need passage to my office and a safe place for my wife and daughter, her dad said. Yes, sir. The man smiled while he spoke. She thought he seemed odd in how he stood and watched them. He made no eye contact. A couple of times his eyes looked behind them and then back to them. She wondered if maybe he was really just an image and not there at all. It was hard to tell. Mom, don't, she said in a whisper, shrugging her shoulders to make her mom stop fretting with the collar on her robe. Ouch, she ducked away from her mom's fingers, now trying to comb her hair. How long were they going to be here? There was nothing around them. It was getting hotter, and Tache was getting heavy. PAXINE had the feeling they were going to get stuck there for hours. It's wise that you all stay together, the man said, as if sensing their impatience. A door will be here shortly. Her dad nodded as if that was normal. A door? Doors weren't normal, at least to PAXINE. She had heard about doors, but had never seen one. No one she knew had ever seen one either. Sometimes she wondered if they really existed. They were different from cubes. With cubes, you entered and waited until the cube transported you to your destination. With doors, you entered and arrived at the same time. The door had to materialize nearby. But where? Probably by the desk. But nothing happened. She expected it to appear right away since the man said it would come soon. But nothing happened. Maybe the desk turned into a door, but it didn't. Impatient and just about ready to ask when the door would come, there was a shimmer off to one side of the desk. There was the door. It was smooth gray-looking metal with no frame or anything assisting it in standing. Cool, she said, lunging forward, but her dad reached out and put his hand on her shoulder to stop her. Sir, the man pointed toward the door. To your office. They are. You aware of your impending arrival? The man didn't move from his desk, and his eyes didn't follow them. Thank you, her dad said, stepping in front of PAXINE, opening the door. Good day, sir, the man said. Her dad's hand on her shoulder prevented her from looking. There had to be something behind the door holding it up. The door didn't look like it went anywhere, showing a gray, hazy mist, but her dad pushed her through. Right behind you, PAXINE, her mom said. Her dad stepped through last, closing the door, which melted away to reveal a wall. PAXINE sighed with disappointment, not being able to check out the door. A single lamp lit the room, but PAXINE knew her dad's office well. There was his great oak desk with his gold nameplate, Doug Cushing, one wall lined with bookshelves, and the collection of sofas and tables in the middle. All the books were about law and government policy. She wasn't interested in them. Her dad turned on more lights, setting the gun down on his desk. His Aussie Stant Robert entered holding clothes, laying them on the desk beside the gun. He reminded PAXINE of a butler. Clothes will be arriving soon for Mrs. Cushing and your daughter, Robert said. PAXINE thought her dad looked funny standing at his desk wearing his robe. Thank you, Robert. Her dad ignored the clothes. Where's Kurt? PAXINE didn't care for Kurt. He wasn't doing a good job if intruders got into their house. She sat down on one of the sofas. Tache stepped out of her arms and plopped down. He stretched to get the kinks out of his sides. After a good yawn, he proceeded to clean where he had been kicked. Kurt isn't in the building, but coming. Phil will be here now. Robert must have been monitoring where people were because there was a knock at the door. Come in, her dad said before Robert could reach the door to open it. Phil, Kurt's second-in-command, entered. He walked as usual, in a relaxed manner, until he saw her mom, at which point he became stiff and awkward. Her mom was dressed in her robe, and it seemed to embarrass him, even though the robe covered her properly. He was much more fun to watch than Tache. Why were there no alarms, her dad said. Phil jerked. We have a problem. No alarms mean an inside job, her dad said. It seems to indicate Phil seemed unable to focus, and that, her dad's stern voice caused Phil to become silent. Phil then realized he should be taking notes. PAXINE muffled a laugh watching him fumble through his pockets. He did pull out a small notepad, but then he couldn't find a pen. They were professionals. Her dad ignored Phil's predicament. If it hadn't been for the Tache alarm, we wouldn't be here. The Tache alarm? Phil's voice squeaked. He continued to search for a pen. Her dad pointed to the sofa at Tache. PAXINE flinched. Tache, the cat, he tripped them up, literally, her dad said in a stern voice. That was a good thing, Phil said. Find out how they found us. Her dad ran his hand through his hair and his voice raised a level. Now, yes sir, Phil jumped, scurrying out of the room. Her dad took a deep breath, catching sight of her. PAXINE knew he could curse up a storm, but he didn't around her. Her mom sat down on the sofa across from her and watched Tache, who was now making a big scene of tending to his back claws with his teeth. He seemed to like having an audience. Her dad watched as well. PAXINE wondered if her dad was somehow going to blame the intruders on Tache. Kurt arrived, surveying the room and giving her mom a quick nod. It didn't matter that she was in a robe to him. He was all business, squaring himself up in front of her dad. I only saw two, her dad said. But they were in battle black and equipped for a night attack. They carried stunners, no alarms. They were already heading up the stairs. The cat tripped them. I think I may have hit one of them before we evacuated. Kurt's eyes moved to Tache on the sofa. Cat alarm, Tache alarm, her dad said. Corrected him with just a hint of sarcasm in his voice. No one knew you were there. Kurt showed no more interest in Tache. I know. That means an inside leak. And what about the timing? The conference was last week. Why now? Her dad said, sitting on his desk. Phil poked his head back into the office. Kurt, a word? Kurt left, but was back in minutes. They want to blame the cat. PAXINE rolled her eyes, frowning. Yep, blame it all on the cat, she thought. They searched the house and all the alarms and deactivators were off. No bodies. They cleaned up after themselves. There is no way to deactivate those alarms from the outside. We tested each alarm that afternoon and everything was working flawlessly, Kurt said in monotone as if reading a report. The cat goes through drawers. He doesn't deactivate alarms. You need key codes for those alarms. So you think I have a double agent in the form of a cat? Her dad gave her a wink. PAXINE almost laughed aloud. Are you sure he's not mechanic? Kurt said, trying to be funny as well. But he just sounded stupid. The mechanical deactivators that prevented her from playing her games worked with a companion alarm that worked using non-electronic parts. The deactivator and companion alarm were supposed to be impossible to bypass without codes. Her dad sighed, pushing aside the pile of clothes on his desk. We have clothes for Mrs. Cushing and PAXINE, one of two women said, standing at the door. One carried PAXINE's school bag. This was going to be a good day after all, PAXINE thought, standing at the same time as her mom. The receptionist's desk was empty. It was too early for anyone to be there. However, PAXINE thought it was strange how Robert always seemed to be at the office. She wondered if he lived here. There was a restroom midway down the hall. Tache led the way, then he tried to push open the door. PAXINE grabbed clothes from one woman, who then left. You're going to have to grow a little before you can open this She pushed open the door and dodged into a stall. Tache tried to balance himself on the toilet while he attacked the belt to her robe. Can I go into the room? She said, hearing her mom in the next stall. The sound of her voice echoing off the walls caused her to jump. She forgot that the thin bathroom stall hardly blocked her voice. I will check, and you don't have to yell, her mom said. Sorry. She almost knocked Tache into the toilet. Her dad's office was the only place she knew of that had a permanent room. Her gamer was in her school bag, which was why it was going to be such a good day if her mom allowed her to go into the room. The room is free today, the woman who was still there said. Breakfast will be here soon and she can eat in there. Please, Mom, I'm dressed, PAXINE said, keeping her voice quiet. She wrapped her pajamas in her robe and handed it to the woman. Please? Okay. Her mom sounded tired. Cool. PAXINE hoisted up her school bag, following the woe. Then out of the restroom with Tache leading again. His tail swayed side to side as if search for danger or paper wads. She laughed to herself at the idea. The hallway and the receptionist's desk were still empty. Her dad, still in his pajamas, was in his office talking with Kurt. Their voices were low, but neither of them sounded happy. The woman swiped her badge to open the room, which contained a couple of chairs and a table. The gray walls were empty of pictures or whiteboards. The door sealed behind her with a hiss, causing Tache's tail to poof out. The silence was intense. Her every move was audible while she put two chairs together, making a lounge chair so she could stretch out. Tache hopped up onto her lap, not relaxing or unpoofing his tail until she started her gamer. Only once the music of her gamer echoed against the walls did Tache stretch, yawn, and settle down for a nap. PAXINE enjoyed his warmth in her lap, petting him until her gamer took her attention away. Boxes on one side, a wall. To scale on the other. Move boxes to build a stair to climb the wall. There was a woman standing in front of her. Sorry to startle you. Your mother sent in lunch, the woman said, setting down the box lunch and leaving. PAXINE wasn't happy to see her. No, she said in frustration. The distraction was enough to cause her to lose the game. Darn, I was almost to the center. This game was impossible to win without absolute concentration. Tache hopped up on the table, checking out the box. I guess I better let them know we have to feed you too, she said, checking out the lunchbox items. There was a sandwich, chips, fruit, and milk. Darn, no soda. Oh well, looks like a ham sandwich. She ripped off a piece for Tache. He gobbled it down. Don't tell Grandma. I don't think you're supposed to get people food, but I guess this is a special circumstance. She took a bite of her sandwich. She set her gamer down, swallowing. I gotta go to the bathroom. You come with me and leave my sandwich, Al. Once she said, dragging her school bag over to prop open the door. Her dad was still in his office. Box lunch wrappers cluttered his desk. He had changed out of his robe into office clothes. His fingers drummed his desk and he looked upset. She decided to stay out of his way. I want an update. Her dad's voice echoed down the hall, stopping her in her tracks. PAXINE stepped back into a doorway, curious. Her dad ran his hand through his short, line brown hair. That was a sure sign he wasn't happy. Her dad was lean and athletic, which always seemed to catch everyone off guard. Most lawyers with a desk job tended to run to fat. PAXINE always pictured him as a big cat, despite the fact that he didn't like Tache. Her dad could wait patiently forever until it was time to pounce. She knew his cases rarely made it to court. Of the few times he had, he always won. Kurt passed by without seeing her. He was also lean and athletic, but his job was more physically demanding. Even so, she always felt he had a hard time keeping up with her dad, both physically and mentally. She figured that her dad just liked him around because he was obedient. Kurt didn't close the door to her dad's office, and his voice carried down the hall. "Sir, we have no idea how the alarms were disabled. We interrogated every single person involved in the alarms. They are clean. Your wife, daughter, and you are the only human options available. Mechanical means would be impossible with the deactivator. As for non-human, you ruled out the cat." Her dad eyed him tiredly. PAXINE knew mention of Tache just annoyed him. Kurt seemed unaware of that. "We have already gone over the impossible. The only possibility is that a non-mechanical device deactivated the deactivators, and then a mechanical device was able to infiltrate and deactivate the alarms. However, that is impossible," Kurt said, sounding like a recording. "The impossible just happened. Your advice," her dad said, using a dangerous tone of voice, "those alarms are impossible to hack," Kurt said, sounding like he was having a problem facing reality. "Your advice," her dad's voice was stern and a notch louder. "We're starting to look at adding some biological alarms. You may have to get rid of the cat," Kurt said, as if that would solve all the problems. PAXINE frowned, thinking there was no way she was going to let them get rid of Tache. "So we should get rid of what saved us?" "I don't think so. Besides, my daughter would have a fit," her dad said to her relief, turning from Kurt as if to dismiss him. PAXINE nodded in agreement to herself, and was glad her dad realized Tache wasn't the problem. Maybe her grandma was right that it was her dad with the problem, not her and Tache. Kurt sighed. "Yes, sir, we'll see what we can do. Meanwhile, we have a temporary suite set up for you with human guards in addition to all the rest." Kurt passed by her, again taking no notice of her. She stuck her tongue out at him before heading to the restrooms. No one else was in the restroom, so Tache kept pressing the knob to run the water in the sink. "Tache," her tone of voice was telling him to stop. He did until she put her hands out, and he put all his weight on the knob to activate it. "Thanks, Tache," she said, washing her hands. Tache tried to catch the paper towel when she threw it in the trash. She opened the door to find her mom lounging in a chair. There was an unopened box lunch beside her. "PAXINE, dinner is at 6. "Did you get lunch yet?" her mom said, nudging her own box lunch. "Just got it. Heading back to eat," she said. "Okay, any homework to be done?" "Nope. All done." PAXINE rolled her eyes. She was way ahead in homework. "Okay, at least I know where to find you," her mom said, opening her lunch. "Ha ha." PAXINE knew her mom was trying to be funny. Anyone who knew her would know she would be in the room playing her games. This was as good as a vacation as far as she was concerned. Her dad was at his desk working. No one saw her go back into the room. Good. Now maybe she could win this game. "Dinner," her mom said, entering the room. The woman with the security badge that unlocked the door waited just outside. "What, already? You're kidding," PAXINE said, staring at half her box lunch sitting untouched on the table. Her stomach growled. Tache eyed her with a mischievous look. "That was my stomach growling," she said to him. He whacked her with his tail. "Pack your bag. Your dad's waiting. And don't forget the harness and leash." PAXINE stuffed her gamer into her bag. "I'll get the trash," the woman with the security badge said. "Okay, thanks." "Hold still, Tache," PAXINE said, trying to hold on to Tache and put the harness on him at the same time. Tache pulled her out of the room. "He hasn't eaten all day, Mom," PAXINE said with a whisper. "Don't worry. I remember traveling with my mom. I've made arrangements." They joined her dad in the cube. Ding. Her parents' cube announced their arrival, and the door opened to a private dining room. A waiter took them to their table. Tache scooted under her chair. "I'm sorry," the waiter said. "No pets." "He's a service animal in training," PAXINE said, using a finger point she just learned that week to have Tache sit and lay down. "Ah, that's a cat," the waiter said, looking dubious. "He's a service animal in training," her mom said, validating PAXINE's claim. "Yes, ma'am," the waiter said, dashing off. Her dad shifted in his chair, showing obvious dislike that Tache was even there. Two other waiters entered and served dinner. One set a glass of milk in front of her. "Can I have a soda?" she said with just a hint of begging in her voice. "No, not so close to bedtime," her mom said, leaning over to shift her purse. "But I'm so stressed and traumatized." She humped her shoulders and trying to look exhausted. "Ah," her mom said, pulling out a covered bowl from her purse. She didn't look like she was buying her charade. "Well, then your milk will help calm you better than soda." Her mom uncovered the bowl by her feet. "You're not stressed with playing 10 hours of games?" her dad said, unaware of what her mom had just done. PAXINE rolled her eyes but smiled to herself when Tache edged over to the bowl to enjoy his dinner. Her own stomach growled, reminding her how little lunch she had eaten, and she dug into her dinner. "We only have to stay in the condo for a couple of days," her dad said, comforting her mom. PAXINE knew her mom really liked their house a lot and wasn't happy about looking for another one. "Can't they just solve the security problem?" her mom said, sounding a little exasperated. "Not until we figure out what to solve," her dad said. "The condo should be nice." PAXINE removed Tache's harness when the cube dinged their arrival at the condo. Tache dashed out as soon as the door opened. "Which room is mine?" she said, running after Tache. "I don't know, PAXINE. Look for your overnight bag," her mom said. "And no rue. Nning." Tache pawed at the second door down the hall. "You won," she said to him. She tossed her school bag onto the bed next to her overnight bag and plopping herself onto the bed. There was a bed and a dresser. She sighed with disappointment. A small, boring room. Tache scooted under her bed, popping out on the other side. "Find anything?" she laughed. He pawed open the closet and peered in. Empty. His tail smacked the door. "Well, that's it. You checked everything." She sat up. Tache hopped over to the dresser. "You already know that's empty." "I haven't put a thing in it." "You stay out." Tache pulled open the bottom drawer and peered inside. "See." He pawed open the next drawer. Tache. He opened the third drawer, stretching to peer inside. "How are you gonna do the top one? You're not tall enough." She folded her arms and watched him. Tache ignored her, jumping up to the top of the dresser. With ease, he pawed open the top drawer. "Well, what is the report, sir?" she said, using a false deep voice. "Yelp," he said, trying to look authoritative. "Room secured, madam." She laughed at her interpretation. "Well, I hope so, or Dad is going to be mad." She closed all the drawers, then raced him out of the room to check the rest of the condo. "No running," her mom said. The hallway that led to the bedrooms contained a service entrance. Tache sniffed the door, ears twitching. "Guards," she said, understanding his ear language. Her parents were in the living room. A small kitchenette with a counter and stools edged one side of the room. The opposite end was the living room with 4 big windows. There were deactivators by each one. City lights were visible. PAXINE counted the windows of a nearby building and figured they were 20 stories up. She guessed the windows were bulletproof. A boring living room. PAXINE sat on one of the stools and spun around. The stool creaked. Her dad opened the front door to the condo. "We're in for the night." "Yes, S." "Aye," a guard said. 2 guards. That ruled out exploring the rest of the building, she thought. Darn, no gaming, no nothing. "Can I have a soda?" She tried to look dejected as she moved to the next stool and spun around. This stool also creaked. "Sorry, PAXINE, I haven't had a chance for grocery shopping," her mom said. PAXINE rolled her eyes. It was obvious her mom hadn't gone grocery shopping. They just got there. So why couldn't her mom send a guard for a soda? She knew she better not push her luck and ask. "Can I go to school tomorrow?" PAXINE said, giving up on the creaking stools. The prospect of staying the whole day in the condo was gloomy. If she had a choice, she would rather go to school. "Yes, you can go to school. With all these guards around, I am sure one can escort you," her mom said, looking a little disgusted at the condo. "Maybe one can help me with my homework," she said, trying to be funny. "I think not, but some homework did get delivered." "So you do have something to go do tonight," her mom said, looking like she wanted to paint and redecorate the walls. Boring. She recognized the brown folder laying on the edge of the counter. It was from her school. She grabbed it, racing Tache back to her room. He beat her and was already checking out her closet again. "Still nothing in there," she said, opening up the envelope. The homework proved to be easy. Busy work as far as she was concerned. She thought she got more homework than everyone else did just because she was homeschooled when she couldn't make it to school. But try complaining about it. Who complained that homework was too easy, or that she had already read her entire English book, history book, and the reading list for the year? She liked it when her grandma gave her things to learn. Because of her grandma, she knew Spanish, Portuguese, and how to read lips. Oh yeah, she checked her school bag. The speed reading book was there. 1 quick chapter, she thought, and then bed. Tache yawned. She yawned. They had missed sleeping most of the night because of the intruders. She wasn't through with the chapter like she wanted, but that was okay. She repacked her school bag for tomorrow. "Stay put, please. I'll be right back," she said to him. Tache yawned, showing no signs of moving. Her parents were still in the living room. "Good-night, Mom." "Dad," PAXINE said. "Night, Paxi," her dad said, putting his phone call on hold and giving her a quick hug. "I'm right behind you," her mom said with a yawn. PAXINE changed into her pajamas while Tache sat at the foot of the bed, staring at her. His tail tapped the bed as if he couldn't wait for her to go to sleep. She laughed and snuggled under the covers. The condo was quiet. Her dad walked by her door on his way to bed, hungry. A furry monster was eating her covers, pulling them away. PAXINE brushed the monster away. "Tache," she said with a moan, not wanting to open her eyes. She slipped into the same furry monster dream. Whack. Okay, shush," he said, squinting open one eye to see sunshine streaming through her window and 2 big yellow eyes staring at her. Tache whacked her with his tail again. I'm up, she said, throwing back the covers over him. She darted into the bathroom. A tail tapped the door outside the entire time she was in there. You're worse than Mom, she said, dressing. I know you're excited to go to school. Yes, you will see Polly and Mia and everyone else. Tache ran ahead of her, leading her to the kitchen. You're up. Good to see Tache doing his job, her mom said, making coffee. He's hungry. She wondered what she was going to feed him. Oh, Marietta here this morning. There was a bag of groceries and a package of cat food on the counter. Yes, your dad said she was here before he left. Pretty early, her mom said, setting out bowls. Had to be. I can't see Kurt shopping for cat food. She kept from giggling at the image in her head while she filled up a bowl for Tache. Her mom laughed, getting the right kind. She got the healthy cereal, though. You don't need a pile of sugar and then go to school and sit, her mom said. She got the right coffee, too, her mom sipped. Ah, I think I prefer tea, she pretended to be snobbish, sticking out her pinky as she ate her cereal. Tache crunched through a whole bowl of food. Whoa there, your harness isn't going to fit if you eat any more. Tache ignored her, eyeing the sun-soaked sofa. You're not taking the cat to school, her mom said. Mom. Show and tell, she said, hoping that was enough of an explanation. That's kindergarten or first grade, not. Mom, Tache has to go with me, she said with determination. Her mom looked hard at her as if seeing her for the first time. He's your tail, isn't he? Yes, she said, not sure if the truth was the right answer. Her mom nodded. Let's find a guard to escort you. She tapped her phone and a guard entered through the front door. Can I get an escort to take PAXINE to school? Let me check, ma'am, the guard said, stepping out of the door, then immediately stepping back in. I'm sorry, none of us are authorized. Is there anything else I can help you with? Her mom glared, dialing her phone. The guard must have taken her glare for a no and left. PAXINE fastened Tache's harness, finding she had to loosen it. See, you did eat too much breakfast. Tache slumped to the floor, making it harder for her to fit the harness. Her mom dialed another number. She tapped her slipper against the table leg. I'm glad this isn't an emergency. Doesn't anyone answer their phone anymore? Try Kurt, PAXINE said. I just did. I know your dad is in a meeting and he turns it off. But Kurt, time to call the one who's really in control. Hello, Robert. It's Dahlia. I have guards at my front door, guards at my back door, and no guard can take PAXINE to school. Can we get this fixed? Her mom didn't look happy. PAXINE thought it was looking bleak and she would have to spend the whole day here with nothing to do. A guard entered. I'm authorized to, PAXINE, scoot before they change their mind. Thanks, Robert, her mom said into the phone. Tache, let's go, PAXINE said, giving the leash a tug, but Tache didn't budge. See, you did eat too much. You can't even move. She picked him up and chased after the guard. The 10-minute bell rang when PAXINE ran out of the guard's cube. She was out of breath when she reached her first class. Hey, PAXINE. When are we veering again? Polly said. A couple of other girls looked upset that he was talking to her. Someone has got to have a birthday party, she said, letting her school bag fall by an empty desk. Tache scooted under her chair. Marcus and Alice were nearby. Hi, Tache, they both said together. Hey, I want to, Polly said. Sorry, Polly. I got homework I have to hand in. She grabbed the sheets out of her school bag, taking them up to her teacher. Hi, Mrs. Corner. Homework? She handed over the homework. And scooted out of the way of two more students behind her. Thanks, PAXINE. Good to see you, Mrs. Corner said. PAXINE returned to her desk. PAXINE, look what I got, Polly said, shoving a plastic container containing two huge emerald green beetles under her nose. I caught 'em. His grin was wide and mischievous. In the Amazon jungle. I see, what about 'em? She wasn't impressed. Really, they're Egyptian scarabs. Some people wear them as jewelry. They're really neat, he said, trying to get her interested. They are pretty, but Egyptian scarabs don't come from the Amazon, she said with certainty. Do you want one? He brushed hair out of his eyes. She thought he was keen on impressing her, but was nervous, eyeing Mrs. Corner. No, I can't really. Class is starting. She didn't think the beetles were that interesting, even though they were pretty. No, it's no problem. I have two. You can have the big one, he said. She said, trying to make Polly understand, but he wasn't. Paying attention to what she said, Polly dumped one of the beetles into another container and handed her the biggest one. I can't take the biggest one, she said, wondering if he was trying to get some other girl to be jealous or something. Here. He handed her the smaller one. I think my mom would like it better if I only had one anyway. Okay, everybody, let's get seated, Mrs. Corner said, standing at the front of the class. PAXINE didn't think her mom would like a big green beetle either, but she shoved the container into her school bag. Polly was nice, and the scarab was pretty. Who was she to refuse a gift from the best-looking boy in class, even if it was a bug? Listen up now. Today is National Testing Day, Mrs. Corner said. PAXINE moaned with the rest of her class. Boy, you picked the wrong day to come to school, Mia said to her. PAXINE laughed, but decided it was still better than staying home. However, at the end of the day, she was glad to head home. "Mom, guess." "Guess what?" she said when the guard let her back into the condo. "What?" Her mom's voice sounded cautious. "Don't tell me you saw the principal today." "Well, actually I did see her, but I wasn't in trouble." "Here," she handed her a bundle of papers. "I got promoted to the next grade." "Again? But I want you to be friends with people your own age," her mom said, looking over the sheets to make sure she wasn't kidding. "Mom, I'm never at school enough. I might as well get through school. Besides, Marcus and Mia got advanced too." "You definitely don't speak like a 12-year-old, her mom said. "Let me see. I remember Grandma telling me about you being a grade ahead. 1 grade ahead. Not 2 or 3, 1. Now, Miss Smartypants, off to do all this new homework and don't ask me for help." Her mom looked more proud than upset. PAXINE raced Tache to her room. He bounded up on the bed and poked his head into her school bag. "Look, a new science book, math book, English," she said, pulling ECH book out. Tache dove into her bag. "Excuse me." She pulled him out and he was holding the container with the beetle. "That is not a snack," she said, having forgotten all about the beetle. "I'm taking it back tomorrow." She put the container on the dresser. Tache jumped up to stare at it. The beetle moved and he put his paws around the container. "Ahem," she said in warning. Tache crouched down, his eyes never leaving the beetle. She tried to ignore him and read her new science book, but it was hard to concentrate and watch him at the same time. "PAXINE, dinner?" her mom said from the kitchen. "I'll be right back." "Leave the beetle alone," she said, glaring at Tache. He flicked his tail at her. "Hey Dad, I didn't hear you come home," she said, surprised to see him sitting on a counter stool. "I came through the front door tonight," he said. "Well, that's different," PAXINE said with a laugh. Her mom served dinner. PAXINE shoveled in her food, fearing Tache was crunching BTLE. "Whoa, hold on there. Since when are you starving?" her dad said. "New science book," she said, sensing that Tache moved the container. "New? What happened to the old?" her dad said. "I got promoted to another grade level," she said. "Again, but I'm not ready to pay for college," her dad said, sounding serious, but he winked at her. "Ha ha." PAXINE finished her dinner and escaped back to her room, sure that Tache was munching beetle. However, the container was still in the same position, and so was he. She managed to read 2 chapters of her science book before getting ready for bed. "Still reading, Paxi?" her dad said, pausing at her door. "No, I'm getting ready for bed. New classes tomorrow," she said, hoping he didn't stop in and see the beetle, feeling stupid that she didn't have it hidden in her school bag. "Good job, good night," her dad said, continuing down to the other bedroom. "Night," she let out a breath of relief. Tache was still watching the beetle when she too turned her light out. "You better leave it alone," she said, but her only answer was his tail drumming against the dresser. PAXINE felt herself float past the clock in the kitchen toward the back entrance. It was midnight. There was a guard standing on the other side of the door and she could smell him. She floated back through the condo to the front entrance. There was a guard there too on the other side, and he smelled of coffee. She floated back to the middle of the living room. A faint noise caught her attention and she floated toward it, but it was only her dad snoring. She floated back to her own room, feeling a sense of uneasiness. There was something wrong. She flew up onto the dresser. The beetle's container lay on its side and the lid was off. The beetle was gone. PAXINE bolted upright in bed, catching a glimpse of Tache flying out of the room. He was twitching from head to foot, and she could feel it. Again, she was seeing and feeling things through him. She felt him leap over the sofa toward the deactivators by each window. His claws dug into the carpet just when he passed the first window to stop himself with a jolt. Through the corner of his eye she spied a flit of a wing. His whole body dropped into a crouch. He was watching the beetle. It was crawling over the keypad of a deactivator on the second window. Tache lunged, hitting the keypad. A red alarm light flashed. PAXINE slid her legs out of bed, feeling as if she was reliving the intruders in the house. She paused, looking up, imitating Tache's move. The beetle flew high through the living room, landing on another deactivator. Tache lunged again. Click, the condo front door opened. "Stupid cat, damn false alarm," a guard said, moving across the room toward the flashing deactivator. "More paperwork." PAXINE felt Tache jump. She didn't need to see through his eyes to know where he was. He was on the counter. Crash, clatter. PAXINE moaned, knowing she was in trouble again. Her mom left a bowl on the counter for cereal in the morning. Tache's tail knocked it off. PAXINE grabbed her robe, knowing she was going to get a talking to from her dad again. Tache had to learn what he could, and bang! The whole condo shook. She felt it vibrate up through her feet. "Shudder," the guard said with a shout. PAXINE didn't know what that meant, but she felt like she was having a bad dream and reliving the worst day of her life. Her dad rushed by her door. At least this time he didn't have a gun. "What is it?" her dad said in a low voice that still carried down the hall. "Checking, sir," the guard said. "I want more than that," her dad said. "A shudder, sir." 2 deactivators went into alarm with wrong code attempts. I saw the cat underneath one just as it went off, the guard said, filling in her dad with all the information he knew. Where's the cat? Her dad said in an angry voice. The cat bumped something off the counter when I was checking the deactivator, then a shutter hit the window. It failed. And since the deactivators were still working, the guard said, using as much detail as he could. And where is the cat now? Her dad said. His tone of voice said he wanted specifics. PAXINE flinched at his words. She could tell he was really angry. This was all her fault, and she felt terrible. On the counter, sir, the guard said. PAXINE trembled, peering around her door. Her dad stood at the end of the hall. The guard rose from the floor where he must have thrown himself when the shutter hit. Her dad turned to face the kitchen, just out of sight around the corner. PAXINE flinched at what he must be looking at. The condo door opened and another guard entered. We have retrieved the shutter, sir. Her dad ran his hand through his hair and then walked out of sight, but PAXINE knew he was standing in front of Tache. She could see him through Tache's eyes. Worry flooded through her. She didn't know what she would do without Tache. For sure her dad wouldn't allow him around. Get Kurt here, IMM. Immediately, her dad said. For a gun. No, wait. There was no anger in his voice. Return to your posts. Is there anyone else who can check deactivators? Her dad said in a normal voice. Something had happened. But what? Someone is coming right up, one guard said, heading back to his post. Again, her mom said, walking down the hall. She was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. Maybe. Different this time. We captured the attacking device. Give your mom my compliments, her dad said. Why? Her mom said with suspicion, as if her dad was playing a joke. Tache alarm, her dad said with a hint of amusement in his voice. Her mom disappeared around the corner. What is in his? She said, getting cut off as the door to the condo opened. Good morning, sir. Sorry to disturb you. Which deactivators do you want me to check? It was a female voice, one of the few female guards. Check them all, please, her dad said. PAXINE couldn't wait any longer. She had to know what happened. Mauve. PAXINE so they can check her room, her mom said, appearing at the end of the hallway. Never mind, she's up. PAXINE joined her mom, and as she expected, her dad stood squared off facing Tache. They were staring at each other. Sir, I heard about the shutter, Kurt said, rushing through the door. He looked disheveled as if he dressed in the cube. Her dad shifted to face Kurt. Tache shifted his gaze to PAXINE. Hey, that's my beetle, PAXINE said, blurring out the words, knowing as soon as she said them that she shouldn't have said anything. Tache sat on the counter, holding in his mouth the beetle. Its legs flailed in the air. You didn't, her mom said, looking shocked. PAXINE felt terrible. She had messed up. She shouldn't have brought the beetle home. But it, she said, stopping because there was no good excuse. Where did you get it? Her dad said, now staring back at Tache. At school. Polly had two. I was going to give it back, she said, knowing that no matter what she said she had done wrong. What have I told you? Her mom said. I didn't think it was harmful, really, she said. Don't take anything from anybody unless we check it out first, her mom said, sounding authoritative. Is it what we thinking it is? Her mom said to her dad, now not sounding so sure. The cat was seen by the alarming deactivators, which is probably where he caught it, her dad said, crossing his arms and looking at Tache as if he had never seen him before. Kurt took out a container and some tweezers, but Tache turned his head away. Tache, PAXINE said. Let him have it. Tache sat looking superior to them all, but allowed Kurt to extract the beetle from his mouth. Kurt stuffed it into the container with some difficulty. Make sure there is a deactivator on it. It could be self-destructive, her dad said. Kurt nodded as he hurried out the door. PAXINE knew her dad said this to comfort her mom more than as instructions to Kurt. Her mom seemed less worried with the beetle gone. Are you done with him? Her mom said, pointing at Tache. Yes, her dad said, looking at her mom with curiosity. Rule number 1, her mom said, sounding dangerous. Tache leapt from the counter. No counters. Even if it's to make a point, her mom said. Her dad chuckled. The guard checking deactivators reappeared. One was deactivated in the girl's room, but it's been reactivated. Thanks. That will be all for now, her dad said, dismissing the guard. Yes, sir, good night, the guard said, exiting through the front door. Back to bed, her dad said. I hope that is all the excitement for this night. PAXINE scooped up Tache. I guess we'll be seeing Grandma tomorrow, she said in a whisper to her mom. Yes, keep it to yourself, her mom said, steering her down the hall by her shoulder. I'm sorry, PAXINE said. I know I messed up. You know these things will happen. Learn from them, her mom said. You sound like Grandma, PAXINE said, bound to ha. PPEN, her mom said with a laugh. And someone is earning his keep. Her mom gave Tache a pat. PAXINE woke the next morning, taking her time getting out of bed. There was no going to school in case she picked up more bugs, even though she knew better. She knew she should have known better before, but she had still messed up. She hid in her room with Tache, but he offered little comfort. He was a sleepy lump under her quilt since he patrolled the condo all night. The door of the condo opened. Her worst fear, her grandma. PAXINE stuck her head under her pillow to shut everything out, but she felt Tache squiggled out and dropped to the floor. His eyes blinking from sleep, he walked over to sit by the door where he seemed to be listening in on the conversation in the kitchen. The noises in the kitchen carried down the hall to her door, which was ajar. She removed her pillow, rolling onto her belly. There was the clatter of the teapot while her mom made tea. Her mom and grandma were talking in low voices, and the conversation kept coming back to, "A beetle," her grandma said again. A stool creaked. "Yes," her mom said. The teapot clunked onto the stove. The freezer door opened and closed. "Extraordinary," her grandma said. Her stool creaked again. Tache stretched his neck to peer around the door. He shared what he saw with her, watching Tinder wander over to the sun-drenched sofa. Her grandma's stool creaked. "Where is Tache this morning? Last I heard from PAXINE he was crashed in her bed," her mom said. "I guess he earned a little shut-eye after last night," her grandma said. "He kept the guards awake and edgy every time he checked a door. I heard them all night long." The microwave turned on. The hum made it harder for PAXINE to hear the conversation in the kitchen. She listened through Tache's ears. "Good for Tache," her grandma said. Tache, as if responding to his name, left her room. His eyes were on Tinder in the sun, but her grandma must have moved and he turned his eyes to her. "Oh dear," there was concern in her grandma's voice. PAXINE concentrated hard to see through Tache's eyes why her grandma was concerned, but Tache's eyes moved back to Tinder. His tail whacked the wall as he walked further into the living room. She could feel irritation flow through him. He didn't like Tinder sitting on the sofa in the sun. That was his son, he glared, jumping up onto the sofa. However, sunshine covered the whole sofa. He plopped down, closing his eyes, too tired to fight. "What?" her mom said, sounding concerned. "Doesn't Tinder look bigger than Tache?" her grandma said. "Oh," her mom sounded relieved. "Her coat is thicker, just an optical illusion." Her grandma didn't sound convinced. Tea poured into a cup. Two objects slid across the counter. PAXINE knew her mom was moving the sugar and cream closer to her grandma. There were two plops and then a clink. Her grandma added 2 sugars and tipped in some cream into her tea. "You're going to the gala next month?" Her grandma said. "Yes, it is sort of important, isn't it? The biggest charity event of the year," her mom said. "Yes. Have you gotten your dress yet?" Her grandma's stool creaked. "No, I'm wearing last year's dress, just changing out the jewelry, with this unexpected high cost of housing, and I hear they have to pay triple the fee to get the guest celebrity. Can't these people donate their time for the cause?" PAXINE thought the gala ball sounded like it should be fun, but everyone seemed to get tense around that time of year. "I expect a 20-course meal with the cost of tickets this year. They've more than doubled in price," her grandma said, sounding grumpy. "If I had the choice, I would pass, but Doug is required to attend," her mom said. "I think his tickets should be free. Darn politics. I'm not required to go, but I certainly need to. I do have to get a new dress. Last year's dress got stained," her grandma said, not sounding happy about going shopping. "Need me to go shop?" "In with you," her mom loved going shopping. "I'll think about that. Can I have PAXINE today? I know you'll be house shopping." "We both know how PAXINE feels about that," her grandma said, changing the subject. Yes, she doesn't like house shopping, and yes, you can have her. Training," her mom said. There was a faint sound of laughter in her grandma's voice. "I think Tinder and Tache need some playtime together," her mom laughed. "Yeah, right, Mom. You have found some good ones, though. You received a compliment from Doug last night for giving PAXINE the Tache alarm." "The Tache alarm," her grandma chuckled. To think Doug was so against Tache at first. The stool creaked. Tinder gave a soft chirp. It sounded like she was sitting next to her grandma. "Sorry, I was forgetting protocol," her grandma said. A teacup slid across the counter. Tache opened his eyes, sitting up. Tinder was sitting by PAXINE's grandma, giving the teacup a sniff. She chirped after the sniff. Tache hopped down and joined Tinder on the chair as if he had been called. He also took a sniff of the cup. Then PAXINE had the strange sensation that Tinder was telling Tache that the tea was safe to drink. Tache yawned and returned to the sofa. "What was that all about?" her mom said. "Just curiosity and the cat," her grandma said. The microwave dinged. The smell of cinnamon-sweet rolls filled the condo. A plate clattered against the counter, and then the refrigerator opened and closed. "Excuse me a moment," her mom said. PAXINE felt a tingle down her spine. Was that her mom coming down the hall? Her door opened wide, revealing her mom with a plate. Her mom set the plate on the bed, giving her a comforting smile. PAXINE returned the smile with a weak one of her own before her mom left, leaving the door ajar. The plate contained a sweet roll slathered in butter just the way she liked it. "I thought I was the one who spoiled PAXINE," her grandma said when her mom returned to the kitchen. A couple of plates clattered. "My child still needs to eat, and she doesn't need to be punished for the beetle. She already knows it was wrong to take things that we haven't checked. We talked about it a long time last night, and she understands. You've taught her more about security than anyone," her mom said. PAXINE cringed upon hearing her mom's words and feeling all the more guilty. She stuck her finger in the butter and swirled it around. "Doug may think he has tight security, but he's forgetting that you both are a weak link," her grandma said. I hate being accompanied by an escort, but I understand. Her mom shifted a plate on the counter. Besides, these rolls are really for me, comfort food. Her mom liked sweet rolls slathered in butter too. Her grandma chuckled, and there was the sound of another plate sliding on the counter. PAXINE could imagine her grandma also slathering butter on her roll. They all did. PAXINE's sweet roll was soft and warm, the frosting was gooey and delicious. With her eyes closed, and she surrendered to the sensation of sweet cinnamon buttery warmth. It melted down her throat and settled comfortably into her belly. She stretched the sensation by licking her fingers in the last drop of butter from the plate. A stool creaked, sliding across the floor. PAXINE's stomach churned. This time it was her grandma coming down the hall. "Done with your roll?" her grandma said without opening the door further. "Yeah," PAXINE said in a quiet voice. "Let's go shopping," her grandma said. Shopping? Her grandma didn't like to go shopping. PAXINE forgot about her churning stomach while she wondered what they needed to go shopping for. "I'll get my shoes on," PAXINE said, slipping off her bed. Once her shoes were on, she brought her plate out to the kitchen. "Thanks, Mom, that was good." She put the plate in the sink. "You're welcome. Have a good time with Grandma," her mom said, giving her a kiss on the forehead. PAXINE fastened the harness and leash on Tache. He was a sleeping slug. She thought she was going to have to carry him, but at the sound of her grandma opening the door, he jumped from the sofa, towing her. 2 guards stood outside when she and her grandma left. One of them followed. "Your dad's security insists on an escort," her grandma said, entering the condo next door where a cube landing was set up. Tache lagged behind to smack their escort with his tail. "Do you know Polly well?" her grandma said when the cube door closed. "School. He was at my birthday party," she said. "At the new house," her grandma said, staring straight ahead as if the escort didn't exist. "Yeah, who brought him and picked him up?" His mom. "Her name's Carol," PAXINE said. "I know her," her grandma said, now watching Tinder, who was staring at Tache, who was staring at the escort. Polly never mentioned beetles before. PAXINE was now watching Tache, who tried to smack the escort with his tail again. "No?" her grandma said, pulling out her phone and dialing a number. "Good morning, Carol. How are you doing?" Her grandma held her phone away from her ear. Carol's hitch-pitched, worried voice came through loud and clear. "Oh my, you would never. The police just left. Polly had something." "I don't understand. This is," Carol said, sounding very upset. "Oh my, what happened?" her grandma said, using a worried voice. "Beetles. Polly had beetles. I don't know where he got them, but I guess he gave one away and the parents got upset, and the police were here, and this is embarrassing. There will never be beetles in my house again," Carol said, crying over the phone. "Oh dear. I'm so sorry," her grandma said. "Oh, David, I have to go. David is here." Click. "David?" her grandma said, looking at PAXINE. "That's his dad." The cube dinged. The door opened to reveal her grandma's office. "Greta?" her grandma's voice sounded stern. PAXINE wondered if Greta ever got fed up with it. "Yes, I know," Greta said, seeming to already know what was going on, ignoring her grandma's tone of voice and sounding cheerful. "Do you realize what this means?" her grandma said to Greta. "There is only one trainer in the world who could train a beetle," Greta said matter-of-fact. "Rostenter." "Yes, and I fired her." "Where is she?" her grandma said, as if Greta could make Rostenter appear at will. "We're looking," Greta said, looking unconcerned. "Has Linda reported back?" her grandma said, sorting through messages on her desk. "I already heard from Linda. She's hitting dead ends and is expanding her search," Greta said. "Who's Linda?" PAXINE said, watching Greta fill Tinder's food bowl. Tache waited like a vulture to eat as soon as Greta was done. "One of my security people," her grandma said. "Shouldn't finding out how Polly got the beetles be easy?" Her grandma sounded frustrated. Greta didn't answer. "Tache, he did have breakfast this morning," she said while Tache crunched away. "Yes, but someone else's food always tastes better," Greta said, adding more food to the bowl. "But it's the same food." Her grandma laughed and her mood changed. "He is a sassy little boy. Not that Tinder isn't a sassy little girl. Here, you can try this out today." Her grandma handed her a backpack. It was large enough to hold. "Tache will fit in that, and you can use it when the leash isn't appropriate. Tinder fits in my bag, and I don't use the leash at all. The leash is more for training or a social setting with friends, but not in public. He needs to be able to move freely, and the backpack will allow him to do that and stay discreet when needed," her grandma said. "Okay, Tache. Enough food or I won't be able to carry you." She lowered the backpack for Tache, who grabbed one more bite of food before hopping in, hanging his head out the top. "Oh my gosh, he's heavy." "He did eat too much." She emitted a grunt as she heaved up the backpack. Her grandma laughed. "Now you know how I feel about my handbag and Tinder. My handbag seems to get heavier and HEAV. Butter every day. No more tail whacking," PAXINE said, referring to Tache's whacking of the escort. But she had the feeling Tache was glaring at the man. "Let's go shopping now," her grandma said, heading back to the cube. When they next stepped out of the cube, there were 2 dress shops side by side. One displayed blue dresses and the other red. The next store's shoe shop displayed colorful striped socks. Next to that store, the smell of perfume wafted out and her grandma entered. The store was narrow but long. 3 aisles stretched from front to the back. The clerk, standing at the front checkout, seemed bored and ignored them. Their escort stayed by the door. Her grandma headed to the middle of the store where there was a display of scented soaps. "Move your backpack to the front. You need to work with Tache," her grandma said. PAXINE shifted the backpack around. It felt funny. "Sniff," her grandma said, handing her a bar of soap. "Strawberry," she said. "Now let Tache smell it." Tache wrinkled his nose at the bar of soap. PAXINE held it for Tinder to sniff before handing it back to her grandma. "Now this one." Her grandma picked out another bar. "Lemon," she said, letting Tache and Tinder sniff. "This one," her grandma said, offering another. Flowery." She was unsure of the scent. "Lavender." "And this?" Her grandma handed her yet another bar. "Mint." "Whoa, Tache. He likes that one." She held the bar away from Tache's paws. Tinder even reached for it. "Probably reminds them of catnip," her grandma said, rescuing the bar of soap. "Hey, you're teaching them the different smells," she said, realizing they weren't sniffing bars of soap for her benefit. "Of course," her grandma said. "I'm sorry, no pets, please," the clerk said, walking up to them. She tapped her pen against her bracelet, unaware of its annoying clack. "These are service animals," her grandma said. "Yeah, right," the clerk said, looking dubious. "Tinder, lemon soap, please," her grandma said, as if putting in an order. Tinder hopped out of her grandma's handbag, sniffing along the shelves. She batted out a bar of lemon soap, and with the skill of a hockey pro, batted the bar over to them. "Thank you," her grandma said, and Tinder hopped back into her grandma's handbag. "Nice trick," the clerk said with a smirk. "Perhaps you would see a better demonstration if you tried to touch my granddaughter. Then you could see her guard cat in action. But I do warn you, I don't have any bandages with me," her grandma said in a casual manner. Tache growled, causing the clerk to back off. PAXINE held in a giggle while the clerk returned to the front of the store, leaving them to continue their browsing of the shelves. Her grandma did purchase some soap and a small perfume when they were finished. "Now this next shop is my favorite. Spices from around the world," her grandma said, taking in a deep breath. The shop's shelves went up to the ceiling. "Good morning, Sarah. Looking for anything in particular?" the store clerk said in a cheerful voice. "Nothing today. This is my granddaughter PAXINE, and I'm introducing her to the wonders of spice," her grandma said. "Okay. If there is anything I can help with, just let me know," the clerk said with a smile. Her grandma moved along the shelves, picking out spices, making her and the tails sniff each one. Snit. Tache sneezed. "Tache." "Sorry, Grandma," PAXINE said. "Cocoa power." He turned away. "No damage done," her grandma said, putting the container back on the shelf. "Over here are extracts. Vanilla, almond, anise, mint." They sniffed every one. The tails again loved the mint. "All these smells are making me hungry," PAXINE said, laughing as her stomach growled. Her grandma checked a clock on the wall. "Well, it is time for lunch, and you only had a single sweet roll this morning. Let's move the backpack around. You do look silly." "Oh, now you tell me. I feel ridiculous," PAXINE said. "But it is neat to see Tache. And what he's doing," her grandma laughed, helping her switch the backpack. "Goodness, you're right. I think Tache did eat too much breakfast. He's heavy," her grandma said, giving the backpack one last adjustment. "And he moves around too much," she said, stumbling when Tache leaned too far over to one side. "Watch it there," her grandma said, grabbing her to keep her from falling over. The spoon sailed through the air, landing on the ground with a clatter. PAXINE twirled around, but Tache jumped out of the backpack, almost sending her head first into a display of wooden utensils. "Hey," she said. "Watch it there." Tache picked up the spoon, putting deep teeth marks into the wood. "Oh no, Tache." She looked worried at her grandma. "I guess someone needs a spoon." Her grandma didn't seem concerned, just amused. Tache carried the spoon over to the clerk and dropped it at her feet. "One spoon," her grandma said, as if she had intended to purchase the spoon all along. "You're in luck. We're having a special on wooden spoons today," the clerk said. But PAXINE thought the clerk just made it up since her grandma was a good customer. "No bag," her grandma said, stopping the clerk from putting the spoon into a bag. She took the spoon, handing it back to Tache before stuffing the receipt into her purse. PAXINE lowered her backpack for Tache, wondering where her grandma could find room in her handbag with Tinder taking up all available space. Tache hopped into the backpack, only to bounce back. He carried his spoon like a dog carrying a stick. The spoon was wider than the backpack opening, preventing him from hopping in. "Ahem," her grandma said, stopping PAXINE from grabbing the spoon. He wanted the spoon. Let him figure out how to get it into the backpack. For 10 minutes they waited, holding in the giggles, while Tache flipped and flopped trying to get the spoon into the backpack. Then he tilted his head and the spoon slid upright into the backpack, and he was able to jump in. After it, PAXINE hoisted up the backpack. "One moment, let me take a picture," her grandma said, holding up her phone. "That is so cool," she said, checking out the picture showing Tache sitting in the backpack right next to his spoon. "The spoon is as tall as he is. Can I have a copy?" "Sure, I'll send it to your mother," her grandma said, tapping on her phone. "Wait till my friends see," PAXINE said, all excited. "Come again," the clerk said. We have more wooden spoons, her grandma waved, laughing. Hey, there's a cafe over there, PAXINE said, pointing. Yes, that is a nice one. Time for some lunch, her grandma said, leading the way. Their escort sat one table over trying to muffle yawns. PAXINE did note he was being vigilant. Now this you should practice as much as you can, her grandma said, keeping her voice low after their drinks arrived. PAXINE could tell her grandma didn't want the escort to hear. Discretion is the key here. People don't like animals in there. Food, her grandma said, giving her lap a light tap. Tinder hopped up, keeping a low profile. Position Tache by your side or in your lap. He needs to check your food, which is why he needs to learn which smells are appropriate and which aren't, her grandma said, keeping her hand close to her mouth. PAXINE put her hand near her mouth like her grandma, to keep anyone from reading her lips. She tapped her lap. Tache jumped up into her lap, banging his head under the table. I think someone needs a lesson in discretion, PAXINE said in a whisper, almost laughing aloud. Tache shook his head, almost falling out of her lap, then popped his head up to check out what was on the table. She rolled her eyes, pushing him down. If you have a drink, put it near you, her grandma said, ignoring Tache. Don't forget your napkin, which helps hide what you're really doing. Her grandma slid her drink close to herself. Her napkin she opened up and held in one hand, hiding Tinder. She held her drink in her free hand, looking off in the distance. PAXINE followed her gaze. Watch what I'm doing, not where I'm looking, her grandma said in a mumbled whisper. Oh, PAXINE said, feeling stupid. Her grandma lowered her glass enough for Tinder to sniff. Tinder chirped. Remember not to look at Tache while you're doing this. People tend to follow your eyes, her grandma said, sliding her glass away and tucking her napkin right over Tinder. Yeah, I almost missed what you did 'cause I followed your eyes, she said in a meek voice. Now you try, her grandma said. PAXINE repeated the actions of her grandma. Tache thumped her with his tail to tell her the drink was safe. Then she giggled. That was good. What are you giggling about? Her grandma said, pretending to straighten her napkin. I thought you were always just a fussy old lady, she said through her hand. Her grandma faked insult, which only made PAXINE giggle some more. However, her grandma said, it's serious business, I know. She thought about what she just learned, and it wasn't about Tache checking her drink. Her grandma's interaction with Tinder took on a new meaning. She wasn't watching a woman interact with her pet. This was her grandma interacting with her tail. Her tail had a job to do. The job was to protect her grandma. Tache was her tail. Did her parents know? Yeah, her mom knew he was a tail. Excellent. Now I want you to practice at home. The true test will be if you can succeed without getting poor Tache shooed off to a back room. Your mom may understand, but your dad won't, her grandma said, being serious. PAXINE nodded, but her head was spinning. Her whole world was changing because of Tache. The only shops left that she and her grandma hadn't visited were the dress shops and a shoe shop. PAXINE didn't think there was much training they could do in those stores, and expected they would head back to her grandma's office, so she was surprised when the cube door opened and a wide, empty hallway greeted her. The silence was so intense she was afraid to break it. Spaced along the hall on both sides were plain, solid-looking doors. At the end of the hall, a neon sign read Exit. Her grandma headed for the exit but stopped at the door right before it. From the distance, this door looked like any of the other doors. Close up it was. What? PAXINE said, confused. Attached to the door was a compass. It kept pointing to different directions even though the door wasn't moving. That was impossible, she thought. But even more peculiar were the small chains, hooks, and the clock with 3 hands. There were also several large coat buttons that formed a smiley face and 2 doorbell-type buttons. Her grandma pressed one. There was no sound, but soon the door opened to reveal a thin old man. He had a full head of light gray hair neatly combed, and he stooped just a little, which made him look shorter than he was. Mrs. Ponduli, the man said with a wink. Very good to see you. I've been expecting you. Oh, you can stay outside. He directed his last words at their escort. The room, smelling of sawdust, oil, and caramel, was full of junk. Every shelf, and there were rows and rows of shelves, was full of glass, plastic, and metal parts. Larger sheets of glass and plastic sat on the floor leaning against walls where there were no shelves or against the shelves themselves. Things even hung from the ceiling. The only clear area was in the center of the room, where there was a single empty table. PAXINE almost felt like she had stumbled into a toy shop, but there weren't any recognizable toys. PAXINE, this is Garan, her grandma said. Good day to you, Garan said with a wink, causing PAXINE to blush. I need quite a bit today, her grandma said, placing her handbag down on the table and motioning for PAXINE to put her backpack down as well. Tache hopped out, his tail twitching with eagerness to explore. Her grandma sat in the only chair and had to scoop out Tinder, who yawned and stretched. 2, new 2, Garan said with a chuckle. So you need 1 chain with TNR, no, hold on, 2 chains and 2 bracelets, and no. PAXINE felt as confused as Garan sounded. He was making no sense to her, but her grandma seemed to understand. Just one bracelet. I already have one. And please bring another chair, her grandma said, looking a little impatient. Yes, that is so. Short one last time. 2 chains and 1 bracelet. Yes, Garan said in a mumble as he hurried off around a shelf. PAXINE thought to ask her grandma what he was talking about, but before she could even do so, Garan was back with a chair. He dashed off again, but was back in a moment. I have what you need, Garan said, holding 3 fine chains. 2 were silver, and 1 was gold. May I? Garan said, addressing Tinder. Tinder blinked her approval, and Garan fastened the silver chain around her neck. The chain was so fine that it settled into her fur and disappeared. May I? Garan said to Tache, who seemed startled that Garan was speaking to him. PAXINE nodded to Tache, who lashed his tail. Garan took that as his approval, fastening the gold chain around Tache's neck. This chain settled into his fur and disappeared just like Tinder's. Garan turned to her. Now you look like a silver. Please have a seat. PAXINE hesitated, not certain if she was to do what he said, but her grandma nodded her approval. Can I have your left foot? Garan said, kneeling when she sat. Her grandma again nodded her approval, and PAXINE raised her left foot. Garan fastened a silver chain around her ankle. Okay, let me tune in the frequencies, Garan said, pulling a small scanner out of his pocket. He scanned her ankle chain, then Tache's chain, and then he scanned her grandma's ankle chain and Tinder's chain. Garan stood, watching the scanner. Then he disappeared into the back. What are these for? PAXINE said, whispering, surprised she had never seen the chain around her grandma's ankle before. These will help you communicate with your tail. Also, please don't tell your dad. They work even where there are deactivators. They get power off of your own pulse and body heat, and use your whole body as an antenna, her grandma said, not whispering. Her voice seemed loud in the room. What are TNR? PAXINE said, examining the chain around her ankle. It seemed so thin that it would break. Transmitter and receiver, her grandma said. How can a chain help me talk to Tache? She was thinking it could be a walkie-talkie, but then she would have to bend over to talk into it. That couldn't be. With the chain you will always know where Tache is, and he will always know where you are, her grandma said. Tache knows that already, she said, not understanding. Her grandma laughed. Only sometimes. Okay, Tache, you are just a bundle of energy waiting to demolish this place. Please don't break anything, she waved her hand. Tache dove off the table and disappeared from view. Of course I should give Garan more time to them programmed, but it can't hurt to give Tache a head start. So do you know where he is? Without looking, her grandma said, watching her. Without looking, she wondered if she was supposed to know where he was by sound. I know what direction he went. She shrugged that she didn't know anymore. Keep trying, but without looking. See if you can feel him. It might be a few more minutes, her grandma said. PAXINE closed her eyes, concentrating hard. She could see through Tache's eyes, but that didn't tell her where he was. A cabinet door opened. Tache, her grandma said. Stay out of the cabinets. The cabinet closed, and PAXINE giggled. He never closes them at home. I believe the cabinets close automatically. Tache is indeed one of the more challenging ones I have come across, but what makes them challenging makes them great. PAXINE couldn't resist the urge, turning toward the sound of the cabinet that opened. Tache wasn't in sight, however. The items on the shelves weren't the hodgepodge collection of stuff that she first believed. Wire reels stocked one shelf and the next contained jars of screws and nails. The jars and reels were stacked in a neat row according to size. Next to that shelf, labeled bins of plastic pieces and metal shavings were stacked as high as the ceiling. She wondered where the smell of caramel came from. A warmth spread around her ankle, bringing an image in her mind of Tache off to her left, peering at her over a basket of metal gadgets. He slinked off as soon as she turned toward him. PAXINE mouthed a silent wow to her grandma. Garan appeared out of the back room smiling. Well, very good, her grandma said. Now I want one more thing. An oral ring. Garan opened his eyes wide as if shocked and answered with his voice very low. Those are illegal. Yes, for people, not for tails, her grandma said, giving him a stern eye. Sorry, don't carry them, Garan said, grinning as he left the room. Well, that was that, PAXINE thought. They'll be going now. Her grandma didn't move. What were they waiting for? Over her grandma's head dangled a twirling spider-looking object. PAXINE was sure it moved once on its own, reminding her of a slender version of the Waterer. Garan returned, humming as if he was having the best day. He carried what looked like a metal punch. Call Tache, but call him in your mind, not out loud, her grandma said. PAXINE tried to think of how she could do that, but the thought itself caused Tache to come up beside her. Her grandma tapped on the table, prompting Tache to jump up. Does he bite? Garan said with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Only if you do it wrong, her grandma said, looking annoyed. PAXINE couldn't tell if her grandma was serious or not. Garan leaned over Tache with the punch, and Tache leaned away, looking leery at both Garan and the punch. PAXINE didn't know if she wanted Garan near Tache with the punch either. Hold his gaze, PAXINE, her grandma said. Tache's eyes moved too. PAXINE, who held his gaze as Garan slipped the punch over a piece of Tache's ear just above his eye. Crunch. PAXINE flinched. Tache's other ear flinched. Garan stepped back with the punch. "What's that for?" PAXINE said, touching a tiny metal ring in Tache's ear. "A number of things we will go over later. The other part," her grandma said. "Well," Garan said, "I prefer coral pink to be exact, and that would fit quite well here, but everyone knows my preference, so that wouldn't work." "I see she already has silver diamond studs." Garan referred to PAXINE's earrings. "Well, not real diamonds," PAXINE said. "My mom gave them to me." "This is very plain," Garan said, handing her a silver ring. It was tiny. PAXINE found it fit on her left pinky. "Perfect as always," her grandma said, rising and handing him a package. Garan put the package in one pocket, taking a package out of another pocket and handing it to her grandma. Then he gave them both a wink and a smile. Tache jumped back into his backpack, and her grandma picked up her handbag with Tinder curled up inside. Garan escorted them to the door, smiling and humming as he walked. He swayed as if keeping time with his humming. "Good day," her grandma said, putting the package in her handbag on top of Tinder. "Goodbye," Garan said, waving them off, grinning as if they had the most enjoyable visit. "We're back, Greta," her grandma said when they exited the cube. "Can you show PAXINE the conference room?" "Oh, and here." "Is that a Garan package?" Greta said. Her grandma nodded. "What fun." Greta looked as excited about the package as PAXINE was curious. "Well, come this way." Greta's movement was so graceful and gentle that the only footsteps that echoed down the hallway were PAXINE's and the escort's. PAXINE wondered if Greta's feet even touched the ground. "Come on in and take a seat," Greta said, opening the conference room door. PAXINE remembered when she had been locked in. She didn't realize how thick the carpet was, muffling their footsteps. There was a big, large oak table surrounded by chairs. Paintings with forest scenes hung on two walls. A projection area was on the far end, and opposite that, a counter with cabinets and drawers. Greta pulled out scissors from a drawer, cutting open the package. Tinder jumped up on one of the chairs, eyeing the package with intense interest. "Someone seems to know what's in there," PAXINE said, surprised at Tinder's presence. Greta folded down the paper of the package to reveal. "Mice?" PAXINE said in total surprise, counting a dozen gray fuzzy mice. Tinder batted one off the table, causing it to scurry across the floor. She jumped after in hot pursuit. Tache jumped up on the chair that Tinder had just left, nosing one of the mice, which vibrated to life and scurried off the edge of the table. He lunged after it. "Garan makes the best toys," Greta said, sliding the scissors back into the drawer. "They're not real, are they? I mean, what makes them work?" She didn't. "Do you see a wind-up button, or a switch?" "Touch one," Greta said. The mouse PAXINE touched came alive and scurried away across the table. It almost reached the edge before it stopped. They only go so far if not touched again. "Watch Tinder, she's a pro," Greta said with a laugh. Tinder tapped the mouse, causing it to scurry off, but before it went too far, she pounced and sent it in a new direction. The mouse was almost out of reach, and she pounced again, sending the mouse in a new direction. She looked as if she was barely keeping the mouse at hand, but she never missed, and the mouse never escaped. Tache came up to the table for another mouse. "Where's the one you already took?" PAXINE said, looking around. Tache tapped a new mouse, causing it to scurry off the table. The mouse hit the floor, moving behind Greta. Tache hopped around the floor, but couldn't find the mouse. He came back up to the table for another. "Watch this," Greta said, brushing her hand over the remaining mice. Evading them, they all scurried off the table to the floor. Tache bounced, pounced, and somersaulted, not certain about which mouse he wanted to get, resulting in letting them all get away. "Enjoy. I'll be right back. It's time for a snack," Greta said, dancing out of the room. The escort leaned against the wall, trying to be invisible, but he kept snickering at Tache. PAXINE pretended to help Tache catch mice, only to let them escape, so he had to catch them all over again. Tinder plopped down on the floor, tired. Her mouse captured under her paw. Tache pretended to ignore her, but then tackled her to get her mouse. Tinder pounced, pinning Tache, letting her mouse escape. PAXINE grabbed the mouse while Tache managed to escape up onto a chair as if his life depended on it. Tinder plopped back down, looking pleased. "Snack time," Greta said, waltzing in with a tray, but it didn't contain the usual tea and ginger snap cookies. "Soda, chocolate chip cookies," PAXINE said with surprise, grabbing a cookie. "They're still warm." PAXINE bit into the warm, gooey cookie. "Fresh baked," Greta said. "My favorite," she said with her mouthful. Greta poured a soda for PAXINE into a glass with ice. "Now don't tell anyone," Greta said, pretending that the soda and cookies were a secret. "Also, don't tell anyone about the mice from Garen's." Greta said this, looking at the escort. "Garen's is not an acceptable shopping place." The escort ignored her and the refreshments. PAXINE pretended to focus on her cookies, pretending to ignore Greta, but she understood what Greta said, knowing that the chain and the ring were to remain between her and her grandma. "The mice are irresistible to the cats," Greta said, grabbing herself a soda and a cookie. "The mice are cool," she said, grabbing another cookie. She could hardly wait to show her friends. PAXINE felt like hitting herself in the head. She couldn't show her friends the mice. They were a secret, you dummy, she thought. Greta rounded up all the mice using the same wrapping to tie them back up. The paper crinkled as the mice moved around, but soon they all fell quiet. I like those, PAXINE said, reaching for the package. No, I'm sorry. These aren't approved, and I don't think your parents would like you to have these, Greta said, hanging onto the package. I can't even take one home, she said, disappointed. Greta shook her head no. Darn. She consoled herself by petting Tache, who was sound asleep on his chair. I think your grandma wants you in her office, Greta said, ushering them out of the conference room. The escort walked ahead of them. Greta came up beside PAXINE, taking her hand, leading her into her grandma's office. Please stand out here, Greta said, talking to the escort, pointing to a stool. PAXINE was sure the stool moved and that there was a pink watering can tucked beneath it. Your grandma will be just a moment, Greta said, releasing PAXINE's hand and shutting the door behind her. PAXINE felt nothing squirm in her hand. A fuzzy mouse. She slipped it into a pocket, pleased. Have a nice time with the mice, her grandma said, hanging up the phone. They're really neat, she said, smiling and not saying a word about the mouse in her pocket. Looks like your mom is busy with house hunting and has asked if you don't mind being stuck with your old boring grandmother. We'll join your parents for dinner tonight. I guess I can handle being bored for a little while. She moved toward one of the sofas, thinking that she was never bored when she was with her grandma. What's the ring for? She knew it was time to get answers to her questions. Her grandma didn't answer, stopping midway to the sofa. The office door opened just enough to allow Tinder to enter. Tache followed right behind her. Her grandma didn't move until the door closed. Then she sat opposite of PAXINE on the other sofa. Tinder settled down beside her grandma and Tache curled up beside PAXINE. First, I hope you know that this is only between us, her grandma said, scratching Tinder's chin. Greta told me and the escort that Garen's wasn't a good place to shop and that we weren't to talk of the mice. I knew that also meant the chains and rings, she said, liking the fact that she had to keep secrets, even from her parents. Exactly, you're learning fast. No one must know. Once they know, then they know how to defeat it. Just like the deactivators. Once someone knows they are used, they find ways to get around them. You need to always know where Tache is, and vice versa. Once someone knows about how you communicate, then they will find a way to break it, her grandma said using a serious tone of voice. PAXINE thought it was like with her parents. Whenever she thought of a new way to sneak over to her dad's office so she could play in the room, her parents figured it out. Her parents knew all her tricks. You know that Tache is not a pet, her grandma said. Yes, I know. He's my tail, just like Tinder is your tail. I know he does, the intruders and the bugs. He's protecting me. She caught Tinder doing a flick of her tail as if she disagreed. Yes and no, his job is to alert you and give you advance notice so that you can protect yourself. He can't stop bullets. He can't fix you up if you're hurt, but he can alert people and get help. He certainly knows how to get people's attention, she said, poking Tache's tail, which for once was motionless while he slept. The chain is your means of communicating with him, and the same is true in reverse. If he needs to alert you, he can do so with the chain around his neck, and he doesn't need to be near you. Therefore, if someone kidnaps you, he is going to know where you are. If he gets catnapped, you are going to know where he is, her grandma said, pointing to PAXINE's ankle chain. Wow, PAXINE said, thinking she had better remember to always wear it. You'll never be able to take that off, her grandma said as if reading her mind. It will grow with you. I guess I don't have to worry about losing it, she said, as if checking it off a list of things to do. Now the ring has a number of uses. First, on Tache, it allows him to hear much more than before. If he focuses, he can hear a mouse run across the road a mile away. What he can hear, he can pass on to you. If he hears a car door, when there should be no one around, he can alert you. Understand? Yes. I watch the security guys all the time. I know what they are watching or listening for. Wonderful. You are doing so well, I am proud. Her grandma looked pleased. PAXINE breathed a sigh of relief, feeling better since the beetle incident. There was a big difference between her parents and her grandma. Her parents were overprotective. They said she was too young, but she was 12 now. Her grandma instead kept teaching her how to protect herself, how to read other people, and how to be better at whatever she needed to do. Second, the ring is a weapon. It works the same on both of you. If either one of you is hurt or is getting hurt, touch your ring to the assailant. They will feel a jolt 10 times the pain you are feeling. Most times that is enough to allow you to escape, her grandma said. Whoa! She examined the ring on her pinky. It was almost invisible. On the other hand, it won't hurt anyone if they aren't hurting you. So don't worry about accidentally touching anyone or holding hands. So now if you are out on a date with a boy and he isn't being nice, you know what to do now. PAXINE blushed. The only boy she really liked was Polly, and she didn't think she would see much of him anymore because of the Beatles. Darn, she thought. That meant finding a fifth player for immersion to resistance. Third, the ring is a tracking device. This will allow those who know about it to track you or Tache down. That way, if both of you are kidnapped, I am going to know where you are, her grandma said. Tache's ring wasn't visible. He had his ear tucked under his paw. Fourth, the ring will allow you into this office. You noticed when Tinder and Tache came in. The door opened for them, her grandma said, gesturing a hand toward the door. Tinder's ears were in plain sight while she sprawled on the sofa. There was the faint glimmer of a silver ring on her ear. See what can be invisible if you don't know it's there, her grandma said, following PAXINE's gaze. Does my mom know any of this? She said. Very little. She does know that Tache is special and that he isn't a pet. Now I am going to put you on an assignment. I want you to watch the afternoon news and tell me what Patricia does. Her husband is Mr. Huntsborough. I want you to give me the details. Okay, her grandma rose from the sofa. Okay, she followed to sit in the chair by the TV. A pad of paper and a pencil were resting on the table by the chair. Her grandma turned on the TV. The afternoon news came on after a handful of commercials. There was a quick highlight of the weather. Then a newswoman spoke about changes in government policy. PAXINE poised her pencil above the pad of paper while she concentrated on the broadcast. The newswoman briefly mentioned something about the Child Protection Act, then jumped into the face of Mr. Huntsborough. What about the Child Protection Act? The newswoman said, shouting as loud as she could, almost jamming her microphone up Mr. Huntsborough's nose. Mr. Huntsborough ignored her, waving a hand as if a fly was bothering his nose. Patricia, his wife, stood behind him, but in full view. Her makeup was perfect, and she wore a dress PAXINE recognized as one her mom passed over because it was so expensive. Patricia's hair stayed perfectly in place, even though the flags behind her were flapping. Yes, this policy fills in the gaps that exist with the important task of protecting our children. I have 2 children, and I couldn't be any more concerned about this than the next parent, he said, posing and looking as if he didn't realize there were 100 cameras on him. Isn't this policy too UCH for the government? Someone said, screaming from the back of the crowd. Patricia smiled with a tilt of her head, showing a mouth full of white teeth. Then she gave her head a slow nod as if in agreement to the shouted question. Nonsense. We owe our children everything. Is that too much to ask? Mr. Huntsborough said. Patricia stopped smiling. Isn't the government asking too much? The newswoman said, pushing her microphone further toward Mr. Huntsborough's nose. Patricia nodded once, as if in agreement. Nonsense. The government needs to go further to protect our children, Mr. Huntsborough said, ignoring the microphone. Patricia frowned, shaking her head side to side once. But Mr. Huntsborough, the newswoman said, pushing away another person who was trying to reach Mr. Huntsborough. No more questions, Mr. Huntsborough said, pushing through the crowd to a car. He opened the car door for Patricia, following her in. The car drove away. The news changed to the upcoming soccer finals. PAXINE turned off the TV, returning to the sofa, not sure about what she had seen. If not for her grandma's request, she probably would have ignored Patricia. Now that she thought about it, Patricia was disagreeing with her husband's comments. Tache still slept but was now half on his back and half on his side. Tinder was now in a tight ball. The notepad, still in her hand, was blank. Well, what did you see and hear? Her grandma said, sitting next to Tinder. Well, it's supposed to rain tomorrow, she said, not sure how to explain what she saw. They interviewed Mr. Huntsborough about some child protection thing. I am not sure I understood. What about Patricia? Her grandma said, prompting. When Mr. Huntsborough talked, she would do the opposite of what he said, like shake her head no when he said yes and such. Then he stopped answering questions, and they got into their car and left. Then they talked about the soccer. That's good. So Patricia stood behind her husband, her grandma said, looking thoughtful, yes, but you could still see her. When he spoke about the importance of protecting children, she would kinda smile and shake her head no, but slowly so not to be obvious. When someone asked about problems, then she would really smile and shake her head yes. Very good, very, very good, her grandma said. What is this child protection thing? She remembered hearing about it before, but she hadn't given it much attention. It's the Child Protection Act. A terrible policy where those who think they are better should be the only ones allowed to have children. Someone is hiding this policy in another policy written to protect children. Thus, they are calling it the Child Protection Act, and therefore it doesn't sound like a bad thing. However, if it goes into effect, there will be a lot of power placed within the hands of the government that shouldn't be there, her grandma said, looking horrified. Is my dad for this? She knew her dad never liked laws that helped people who shouldn't. To be helped, he hasn't said. Your mom is on one of the committees to review the policy, and she's a strong proponent against it. There is going to be a show of hands, so to speak, at the gala ball. There is always a theme tied to the gala, and this year the theme is children in need. Thus it ties into the Child Protection Act. That is where they are going to do a strong push for the act, since everyone who is someone will be at the gala, her grandma said. Wow, no wonder everyone gets so nervous about this ball. This is serious, she wondered if adults ever had fun. I am impressed with you. This is very serious, and I'm glad that you can see this, her grandma said in a quiet, respectful voice. Is there anything I can do? Yes. Be careful. Be cautious. Train with Tache. Make sure he gets time to sleep. Don't trust anyone, her grandma said, turning to the door. No one was at the door. Had her grandma heard something? A click? Her grandma rose, holding out a hand to have PAXINE stay put. W.H. She returned to her desk, taking something out of her handbag. PAXINE could not sit there. She had to see what was going on, following her grandma to the door, which opened when her grandma approached. The escort wasn't sitting on the stool, but walking toward Greta's empty desk. Greta was nowhere in sight. You've left your post, her grandma said in a quiet voice that still carried across the room, causing the escort to jump. He whirled around, trying to hide a camera in his hands. The click, PAXINE thought. Her grandma revealed within the folds of her skirt a gun. I think I will take that camera and relieve you of your post, her grandma said. The escort's smile was smug. I don't think so. I don't get my orders from you. That wasn't an order. That is what I intend to do, her grandma said matter of fact. The man's laugh was cut short when Greta hit him from behind. He dropped like a brick. I have the whole thing recorded too, Greta said, checking her fingernails to make sure she hadn't broken any. I set him up. He was acting too odd. Her grandma nodded in approval. Yes, Garan slipped me a note that said this guy kept trying to use an oral ring to hear what we were doing, but Garan intercepts those things. An artist knows his own art when he sees it. I also heard the click of his camera. Greta picked up the phone on her desk. I need cleanup, she said into the receiver. Greta hung up the phone and retrieved the man's camera. A door that PAXINE hadn't noticed before opened, and 3 women entered. Strip him of all his gadgets. Call Garan to make sure you haven't missed anything, and then hold him. Thank you, ladies, her grandma said. Greta and the other 3 lifted the unconscious man and carried him off. Now do you see what I mean about trusting no one, her grandma said, stepping back into the office. Tache already told me he didn't like him, she said, moving back to the sofa. I'll have to speak to your mom about your dad's escort guard. Yes, her grandma said. PAXINE knew her mother would have plenty to say. We have the whole government for our protection, and this happens, her mom said in a loud voice after she heard about the incident with the escort. Her parents, grandma, and PAXINE stood in her dad's office. Kurt, come into my office, her dad said into a phone. Don't you screen these people, her mom said, spinning around to attack Kurt with her words as soon as he walked into the office. She was spitting mad. Kurt flinched. Exactly what happened, he said, looking to PAXINE's grandma. Her grandma told the story about the escort abandoning his post. She had footage from her own security cameras that showed him taking pictures. Of course, the footage of Greta knocking him out was missing. There was some static, and when the picture cleared, there was no one there. She figured her grandma made it look like the escort had caused the static, but bungled it just enough to show he was doing something he shouldn't have. Nothing was taken, but taking pictures is a breach of my security, her grandma said with a serious face. PAXINE kept from giggling at her grandma's performance. Can I borrow this? Kurt said, surprised when her grandma nodded and handed over the footage. I'll check on this right away, he said, leaving. I can't believe this. He was alone with our daughter. Some escort. Her mom stood arms crossed. We do screen our people. He could have just been a nosy picture taker, her dad said, trying to soothe her. I'm hungry, PAXINE said to the cranky group of grown-ups. However, no one seemed to hear her. She spoke louder. Dinner? Her dad heard, steering her mom out toward the cube landing. Her mom was still hissing angry words when they left for the restaurant. The restaurant wasn't full, but as usual, her dad had reservations. The waiter seated them right away, leading them to their table while all the other patrons watched. PAXINE felt like Mr. Huntsborough with hundreds of cameras and eyes watching her. Well, maybe no cameras, but every table of people stared when they passed. Her dad was well known. However, PAXINE suspected having 4 security guards following them was as good as trumpets announcing their entrance. PAXINE pretended to be invisible, positioning Tache on her lap without anyone noticing while she unfolded her napkin, draping it over him. Is it supposed to rain? Her mom said, quieter now they were out in public. I don't know. Do you have an outside activity coming up? Her dad said. No, I just need some sunshine, her mom said, looking tired. Waiters came with drinks. PAXINE wondered how old she would have to be before her parent let her order her own dinner. Milk was set in front of her. She would never order milk. At least her parents couldn't tell her not to practice with Tache because they didn't know she was practicing. She reached for her milk, paused, and then glanced at something that she pretended caught her attention. Tache sniffed her milk hidden by her napkin. His tail whacked her and she took a sip of milk. She placed her glass down, almost laughing. Tinder was just finishing a sniff of her grandma's tea. Her grandma took a sip, glanced over at her, and winked. A waiter served soup. PAXINE scooped up a spoonful, glancing up. A tail thump approved the soup and she slurped clean her spoon. It was a good vegetable beef. Tache licked his lips, watching every move of the spoon. Even though PAXINE knew she wasn't supposed to, she let drip one drop. Tache caught it in his paw, licking it clean. Crash. PAXINE flinched, almost sending Tache to the floor. A waiter landed by her chair with a thud. His tray of water glasses scattered across an empty table, splashing everyone around. She only felt a couple of drops. The owner of the restaurant rushed in. Is everyone okay? Is there broken glass? No glass? Sorry, I tripped, the waiter said, trying to restack his tray as fast as possible. Slow down, that's probably how it happened. There is no end. Need to rush, the owner said, turning to PAXINE's dad. You okay? Yes, hardly a splash, her dad said. The owner moved on with apologies streaming from his mouth as he moved over to the next table. Two waiters arrived with towels. One brushed against her chair. Tache growled. Her dad's security closed in, watching the cleanup. The waiters finished wiping up water and resetting the table. The other diners returned to their dinners. PAXINE returned to her soup and sipped another spoonful. Grr. Ouch, she said when Tache swiped the spoon out of her hand. Oh my, her grandma said, sounding fuzzy. PAXINE felt confused. Something happened, but she couldn't tell what it was. Tache was upset, yelping at her. She could see his mouth moving. Her parents seemed unaware of anything, appearing to move far away. Her gut twisted and turned, and she couldn't breathe. Why was her grandma on her phone? Didn't she understand something was wrong? Why was her mom holding her? Why were her mom's lips moving? Her ears exploded. PAXINE, her mom said, screaming. Someone poisoned her. The security around their table scattered. Where were they going? Didn't they know she had a problem? Why was her dad looked like he was seeing how slow he could take his phone out of his pocket? Then everything jiggled and the room spun. PAXINE knew only because of Tache that a security guard picked her up and they were now in an emergency cube. Her grandma was talking to her mom, but PAXINE couldn't understand anything that was said. The cube door opened. Everything changed speeds. People were talking too fast and running. The floor turned into the ceiling and she was rolling at high speed down a hallway. She could hear her mom speaking so fast that it was impossible to understand. A door crashed open and they were in a room with lots of equipment. The lights were bright and she couldn't keep her eyes open. She felt a poke on her arm and someone put something over her head. Cool air filled her nose. She could breath. Silence, whoosh. PAXINE felt tired, opening one eye to see a big yellow eye staring at her. Tache was sitting on her chest. How did you know which type of poison? PAXINE didn't recognize the voice, too tired to keep her eye open to see. Almonds, her mom said. The cat smelled almonds. Almonds don't belong in vegetable beef soup. The door opened and closed. How is she? It was her grandma's voice. She's breathing easy. Thank goodness it was only a little dose. Another spoonful or two would have been fatal. Aunt Sarah, I'm Judith, the unrecognized voice said. Oh my, Judith, I mean Dr. Judith. I didn't even recognize you. Thank you so much for saving PAXINE, her grandma said. You're welcome. I know my mom mentioned to you that I was starting a practice in the area, Dr. Judith said. Aunt Sarah, PAXINE thought. Her grandma was an aunt. Yes, she did, and I am so glad to have you in the area. I look forward to working with you, her grandma said. I've lots of experience with, Dr. Judith said. PAXINE had the feeling Dr. Judith was looking at Tache. Now PAXINE just needs a little rest and then she can go home. There is no reason to keep her overnight, Dr. Judith said. Thank you, Judith, her mom said, sniffing. Her mom was crying. You're welcome. Here's a box of tissue, Dr. Judith said in a comforting voice. The door opened and closed and PAXINE had the feeling that she was alone with her mom and grandma. Why PAXINE? Her mom said. Child Protection Act, her grandma said. Those monsters. Destroy a child for their own good. Her mom's voice was a low hiss that caught Tache's attention. He slid off PAXINE's chest and lay alongside her with only his head and one paw resting on her. I'm surprised. However, Doug's view of this act, her grandma said. He isn't going to vote for it. He keeps waiting for an amendment to correct the act, but obviously no one is coming forward to correct it. He realizes this can't become law. He, like everyone else, is waiting for the gala ball to see what happens there, her mom said. Looks like someone doesn't want to wait for the gala, her grandma said. Is this conversation safe? Her mom said. Safe? Was that a spider walking across the ceiling? Wait, PAXINE thought. Were her eyes even open? She opened one eye. There weren't any spiders on the ceiling, but her grandma was digging in her purse. Here it is, her grandma said, bringing out what looked like a pen. A light on the pen blinked once, and her grandma nodded. Yes, we're safe. Can you get me a cat? Her mom said. Dear, don't want to bring you in on this, her grandma said. Mom, it doesn't look like we have a choice. I know you're training PAXINE. I know she'll be your successor. I know that's how it is to be. Now I think I need to provide a little more of an assist in the matter. To protect her, her mom said with some insistence. PAXINE shifted her arm around Tache. Did she hear right? She was being trained to become her grandma. A cat is not what you need. In the meantime, I can provide a nanny that will be a much better solution than one of Doug's escorts, her grandma said, being calm. A nanny? Wasn't that the same as a... I don't want a babysitter, PAXINE said. Her mouth was dry. Not a babysitter, dear. Think more of a kung fu fighter, her grandma said. How are you feeling? Tired. Thirsty, she said. Thinking about a kung fu babysitter. Her mom and grandma smiled. PAXINE guessed that was a good sign. Excellent. I think tonight you are going to stay at grandma's, and perhaps in a day or two meet your new nanny, her grandma said, giving her hand a squeeze. PAXINE managed a weak smile. If she makes me eat vegetables, I am gonna sick Tache on her. That's my girl, her grandma said, releasing her hand and stepping out. Her mom blew her nose, rising to give her a hug. You better practice more with Tache, her mom said, keeping her voice to a whisper. Yes, Mom, she boomed that she didn't mind her mom's hug at all. I love you. Oh, you gave me a scare, her mom said. It was light out. Tache's eyes were staring at her. Where was she? Oh, Grandma's guest bedroom. Why, she was still wearing her clothes from yesterday. A bandage on her arm, the IV, the hospital, the soup. Tache kept staring at her. I'm okay, PAXINE said, slipping out of bed. Tache followed her with his tail curled around her leg. Really, I'm okay, she said, surprised that she wasn't weak or sore. Her stomach gurgled. She hoped she could eat some breakfast, guessing what little soup she had eaten last night had been pumped out. She felt grungy, eyeing the shower. Could she get the bandage wet? She peeled the bandage back to see a single red spot on her arm. Meow, Tache said, saying she didn't need the bandage. Yes, I agree, was expecting something bigger or, I don't know. She threw away the bandage. The shower felt wonderful. Tache stood just inside the shower curtain. Ya thin. "'Kay, I'm gonna drown," she said, spraying him with water. Tache smacked her with his wet tail. There were clean clothes in an overnight bag on the floor of the bedroom. She felt refreshed, heading down to the kitchen, hopeful for some breakfast. Her mom was on the phone, her eyes glued to a computer screen, but she jumped up when PAXINE entered to give her a hug. Good morning, her mom said, holding her an extra second or two longer than usual. Morning, PAXINE said. Real estate agent? Her mom nodded, talking into the phone. Yes, that will work fine, thank you. Bye. Her mom put the phone away. How you feeling? Hungry, she said, opening a tin of blueberry muffins. Her mom smiled. Help yourself. PAXINE checked the refrigerator. Score, she said, pulling out a brand new unopened carton of chocolate milk. Her grandma always seemed to know what she needed. She didn't even bother looking to see if Tache had food, hearing him crunching away on the other side of the counter. Her grandma always had food out for Tinder. I didn't know chocolate milk and blueberry muffins tasted good together, her mom said from behind her computer screen. Try one? She offered a glass. No thanks. I already had my muffin with coffee, her mom said, not really watching the computer screen, but PAXINE. She knew her mom was making sure she was really okay from last night's ordeal. Her mom must have decided she was okay, returning to looking at houses. PAXINE set her empty dishes in the sink, looking around for Tache. He was nowhere in sight, which surprised her since he seemed glued to her earlier. She wandered into the living room, finding him playing chess. Of course, he was playing cat chess, which involved batting chess pieces off the chessboard, and seeing how quickly he could lose them under the sofa. She retrieved a handful of pieces, resetting the chessboard as if she was going to play. Tache watched, looking like he was thinking out the strategy for his next move. He reached up, pretending to stretch, batting the rook off the board. Excuse me, she said, picking up the piece. I do believe you have to start off with a pawn. She tapped the appropriate pieces. Tache ignored her, walking by the chessboard as if done playing. But just at the last moment his tail knocked off a pawn to the floor. He whipped around, batting it across the floor. She rolled on the floor, laughing. The pawn rolled into a patch of sunlight, and Tache flopped down. What? A laser light beam got a hold of you and knocked you down, she said, laughing. Tache licked a paw, squinting in the sunlight, and settled down for a nap. She crawled over to him and tried to interest him in another piece, but he just rolled over to sun his belly. I win by default, she said, trying to tease him. Tache ignored her. The revenge of the rook, she said in a deep voice, walking the piece back and forth. But that got boring fast with Tache not playing anymore. A nap with Tache would have been nice, but she had enough. Sleep? There was the mouse from Greta. But with her mom around and Tache sleeping, she decided it wouldn't be wise to reveal it. There was nothing to do. Time to search for secret passageways. She headed toward her grandma's bookcases. PAXINE was on the second shelf from the top, thinking logically that the lever for the passageway would be more at her grandma's height than hers. PAXINE, her mom said, causing PAXINE to jump. Yeah, she said, wondering why she felt guilty moving the books. Let's go look at a house. Her mom stepped into the living room. Okay. She slid the book she had out back onto the shelf. And there are no secret passageways, her mom said as if reading her mind. I've already looked. The cube area was in the living room. She followed her mom into the cube. When the cube door opened, PAXINE saw an empty street that ended in a cul-de-sac. There was a for sale sign in front of a modest white 2-story house. A bright yellow electric car pulled up and a woman, Tache, realtor, stepped out. Oh, you are going to love this house, the realtor said, jangling her jewelry with every syllable. The kitchen is updated. PAXINE lagged behind to escape the realtor's banter, knowing the kitchen was the first place her mom and the woman would head. She decided to go upstairs. There were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Every wall was painted white, something PAXINE knew her mom would change. They both liked color. Downstairs there was a living room, a dining room, a study, and the kitchen. She saw more boring white walls. The realtor seemed to think the kitchen was all her mom was interested in. But her mom, tired of the banter of how wonderful the kitchen was, drifted into the dining room, forcing the realtor to follow. PAXINE took the opportunity to slip past them down the back hallway that ended at the back door. There was a small porch with steps leading down into the backyard. A tall wooden privacy fence ran down both sides of the yard but stopped at the back. Tache opened to another road. The yard was very long. One side of the fence ended sooner than the other did because of a ditch. The longer side, though, had a gate midway. The gate was unlatched and swinging with the breeze. Beyond the gate were some trees and an empty lot. The front yard was small. The nearest neighbor was across the way. It was very quiet, which was what her mom liked. PAXINE thought quiet was nice sometimes and wondered if other kids lived on the street. Tache stirred from within the backpack and stuck his head out, blinking in the sunlight. Well, what do you think? We have trees and room to play. Lots of places to hide or escape, but there's easy access to the place from front and back due to the roads. That can be both good and bad, she said. Tache blinked, yawned, and sunk down into the backpack. Well, thank you very much for your input, she said, pretending to be snobbish, knowing he needed his sleep. She knew if he had been more awake, he would have liked to explore. Her mom and the realtor were back in the kitchen. I'll have my interior decorator take a look, and I'll let you know as soon as possible, her mom said. PAXINE knew this meant Kurt had to do a security check of the place and give his blessing. She was glad when the realtor left. Her mom seemed glad too, more relaxed when she walked down the street. PAXINE knew her mom was getting a taste of the neighborhood. What that meant and what her mom was looking for, PAXINE had no idea. Don't tell your dad we went without an escort, her mom said, tossing out her cube at the end of the block. PAXINE hadn't even realized. Sometimes I think having an escort just invites trouble, her mom said when the cube door shut. We have Tache, PAXINE said. The cube dinged and they were back in her grandma's living room. Yes, but I don't think your dad would think the same as we do, her mom said, shrinking the cube. PAXINE lowered the backpack so Tache could hop out. He disappeared as soon as he did. New homework arrived, her mom said from the kitchen. How does it find me? She said, grabbing the packets. Do you really want to know? Her mom said. PAXINE had the feeling her mom was thinking it was obvious. The only obvious way homework could find her all the time was through her dad. Oh yeah, that was probably it. She rolled her eyes. No, she trudged off to the living room as if this was the last thing on earth she wanted to do. But really, she was glad to have something to do, especially since she could combine speed reading techniques with her homework reading. She found herself hardly able to wait to tell her grandma about combining schoolwork with grandma work, but her grandma didn't come home for dinner. Neither did her dad. They still weren't home when she went to bed. Morning, PAXINE said, looking for cereal in her grandma's kitchen. Did Grandma leave for work already? Morning, yes, she did, her mom said, sitting at the kitchen table with her computer. Darn, I thought she'd at least leave later since she got in so late, PAXINE said with disappointment. She's really busy with the gala stuff. Are you going to look at houses all day? Not too long. I really liked that last one. It may do, although it's not as nice as the other one. I still wish they could solve the security thing. I don't think moving from house to house is the solution, her mom said. PAXINE crunched through her cereal, nodding in agreement with her mom. Done with all your homework? Her mom pushed the computer away. Yes, I'm reading a book on speed reading, and it's helping me get my homework done faster, she said in between bites. So what do you have planned for today? Her mom was watching her. Planned? She left her last spoonful of milk hanging in the air. I didn't know I had to plan anything. She finished the milk, rising to rinse her bowl. What would you like to plan? Well, I think I'll steal a cube and head over to Dad's to play in the room, she said, wondering what her mom was getting at. Think again, her mom said. Look for secret passageways or read a book. She decided to be more realistic, realizing her mom just wanted to know what she was going to do. Good plan, her mom said, rising to get more coffee. PAXINE wondered how Polly was doing, grounded for life maybe. She wondered when she would see the rest of the gang again. With all the stupid security problems, she expected she wouldn't see anyone until the next school year. She headed toward the living room with a sigh. Tache was sleeping in the sun in the same spot as yesterday. She wasn't going to bother him since he needed his sleep. There wasn't any more homework, which also meant no more speed reading practice. Why did her grandma have to work so much? Why couldn't she go with her? Why? Secret passageways, that's why. Her grandma's house had to have one. Yeah, that's why her mom wasn't against her looking, because she was meant to find one. But where else other than the living room, her grandma's office? There was one bookcase in the office. PAXINE examined the top shelf. A book about 19th century actors and actresses caught her eye. The people pictured wore goofy-looking costumes. "Wanna go with me? I have a couple of errands to run," her mom said, sticking her head into the office. "No secret passageways, 19th century actors," she said, showing the book, thinking about accompanying her mom. Running errands with her mom was one of her least favorite activities, but today it sounded like the most wonderful thing to do. "Can we get ice cream?" She replaced the book. "I think we can manage that," her mom said. "I'm in. Where are my shoes?" She ran to the kitchen, knowing that was where she last left them. Her mom waited in the living room. "Here's your backpack." Tache was already inside. "Thanks, Mom," she said, tying her last shoelace. "We have to pick up an escort. Hopefully this one is better than the last one." Her mom didn't sound too enthusiastic about it. The cube door opened, revealing her dad's office reception area. An escort stood there waiting. "Mrs. Cushing, I'm Dwayne," Dwayne said. "Good morning," her mom said in a flat voice. But Vera, her dad's receptionist, waved and her mom said with more cheer, "Hi, Vera." The cube door shut. The parking lot to the department store was almost empty, not being the prime shopping time. The store wasn't PAXINE's favorite, but she felt good getting out, skipping behind her mom until she felt Tache stir. He poked his head out but then slid back down into the backpack. Her mom stopped and she almost ran into her. There was a rack of socks. On the other side were toe rings. "Ooh, can I get one of these?" She skipped around to take a closer look. "Ahem," Dwayne said, motioning her back to stand beside her mom. What? She couldn't believe he was going to make her stand right beside her mom the whole time. She glared at her mom in frustration. This wasn't going to be as much fun as she thought. "What color socks do you want?" her mom said with a smile, looking at socks. "Depends on what I'm wearing." She picked out a pair of bright socks with cartoon characters on them. "Neutral tones are better. They go with anything," her mom said, taking the colorful socks and putting them back. PAXINE picked out 3 pairs of tan socks and then attempted to juggle them. They fell to the floor. Her backpack bumped against her when she bent to pick them up. Then it whacked her. She stood upright, looking around. There was a softer whack and she realized it was Tache. He wasn't happy about her bumping him around in the backpack. He wasn't getting any sleep. "Sorry, Tache." She put the socks back. Her mom moved over to check out some shirts and sweaters. PAXINE sighed, wondering if she would be better off at home reading. This was really boring. Dwayne ignored her glare, scanning the area around them. He seemed to get more and more nervous as the store filled with shoppers. "Okay," Dwayne said. "We should leave immediately." Her mom rolled her eyes, looking around. "I need a gift certificate from customer service, and we can go," she said, turning toward customer service, but pausing at perfumes. "Ahem," Dwayne said, sounding as if he was clearing his throat. Now her mom wasn't looking that happy. PAXINE didn't understand why Dwayne was nervous. Tache wasn't worried, and there weren't that many more customers than when they arrived. The store looked like it was ramping up for the summer season, and carts with new dresses lined the aisles. The few people she did see were rummaging through the carts, trying to get the new styles ahead of everyone else. Thud Dwayne, who was following behind her, was nowhere in sight. "Mo," PAXINE said, catching her breath. Her mom, who had been in front of her, was gone in the confusion of carts now moving in around her. "Mom," she said in a quiet voice. The carts stopped, and from around a cart stepped a woman. She was wearing a smock like that worn in the store, but there was no name tag. Beneath the smock, she wore gray slacks and a white top, which reminded PAXINE of a security guard. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman said in a voice that was a little too high and sweet. PAXINE pretended to look at a rack with dresses, putting her back to the woman, acting as if she hadn't heard. Tache exploded out of her backpack, pushing her into the rack. He dropped in front of the woman. PAXINE untangled herself, wondering what good that did, jumping in front of the woman. "Yo wow," the woman said, shrieking as 4 angry slash marks grew red across her cheek. Tache spun, dodging into the rack of clothes, whacking her with his tail to follow. "Where did that come from? Look what it's done," the woman said, shrieking to someone PAXINE couldn't see. PAXINE knew to follow Tache while he led her through another rack. The woman came into view, pointing bloody fingers in the direction Tache and she had gone. "We ain't that way," the woman said. Thank you for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this telling story video, please do not forget to give us a like, comment, share, and subscribe.